First off, thanks to everyone who took the time to fill out my survey that I posted last week. I've been overwhelmed by the number of responses, and I've been slowly sifting through all that information to present back to you next week. Now, the survey is going to be up for another week, so if you haven't had a chance to fill it out, I'll have a link to it down below. Please take some time, check it out. It's only a single page, super easy to do, and gosh, the results have been amazing. So this week, I thought I would take some of your suggestions to heart and offer up something other than just simply a book review. This week, I thought I would talk about podcasts. Now, I am an avid podcast consumer. I've got a whole new batch that I've actually introduced into the queue thanks to your suggestions. But in the meantime, I have a pretty regular group of podcasts that I listen to. Podcast Moment continues on, especially after everyone sort of knew what podcasts were with season 1 of Serial. Everyone was tuning in to find out about the case of Adnan Syed. It even garnered a spot-on parody on SNL. More recently, ABC picked up Zach Braff's pilot called Startup, which follows the story of a 30-something-year-old husband and father who quits his stable full-time job to start a podcast. It's actually based on a podcast called Startup, where Alex Bloomberg leaves his job as co-producer of This American Life and co-founder of Planet Money to start a podcast empire. And that would eventually become Gimlet Media, which is host to the fantastic podcast Mystery Show, as well as Reply All. Right now, I'm subscribed to about 25 active podcasts. I'm lucky in that I live close enough that I can walk to and from work, which means I get a lot of podcast time in. I'm one of those crazy people that like listening to podcasts at 1.5 times speed. So today is going to be a bit of a mixed bag as far as podcasts go, but I will start by assuming that you know fellow booktuber Simon Savage co-hosts with Thomas Otto a book-based banter podcast called The Readers. Now, they get together every other week and pick a bookish topic like challenging reads or bookish pet peeves and sort of spiral out from there. It's a lovely bookish chat. And as evidenced by the survey, a lot of you enjoyed as well. It's been in my rotation for years, and it's a lot of fun. Another fellow booktuber, Kendra Winchester, co-hosts with Autumn Privet and the Reading Women podcast. They've had some fantastic author interviews. Most recently, they've had Minjin Lee, the author of Pachinko, and John Young, whose book Shelter won their 2016 Reading Women Award for fiction. So obviously, I am a huge fan. And I can't talk about bookish podcasts without mentioning the Book Riot podcast, hosted by Jeff O'Neill and Rebecca Shinsky. Now, I love everything that Book Riot does, and I had the good fortune of attending Book Riot Live last year, and actually attended a live taping of this particular show, which was a blast. So basically, the show talks about industry news and bookish goings-on, including, let's say, Obama's book deal, the latest movie to TV, bookish adaptations, railing against ebook pricing, and Roald Dahl's Butt East beer, which is totally a thing. Now, if I have any sort of complaint, it's the fact that Jeff reminds me of this joke. Knock, knock. Who's there? Interrupting cow. Interrupting moo. Jeff is always stepping on Rebecca's spot. And I know Rebecca doesn't mind. It doesn't bother her at all. And Jeff is not some mansplaining white guy. But it's like vocal fry. Once you notice it, you can't not notice it anymore. But those two have banter to spare, and they just keep that show moving. Speaking of banter, another Book Riot podcast that's near and dear to my heart is All the Books, where Rebecca Shinsky co-hosts with tattooed, metal-loving, unicorn-naming, reading machine Liberty Hardy. They talk about the week's new releases. Now, there's way too many books to mention every week, although Liberty probably has read them all, so they have their top picks with an eye to 25% diverse reads, which is absolutely fantastic. It's a great way to see what books you need to put on hold at the library or what to look for at the bookstore when you're out. So lately, I've been really enjoying the New York Times Book Review podcast. Every episode features an author interview with an upcoming release. They will have a little section on industry news in the publishing world, and then a roundtable discussion about what they're reading this week. And recent episodes have featured interviewed with Mohsin Hamid of Exit West, George Saunders of Lincoln and the Bardo, and Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant talking about grief in their book Option B. So I've been really enjoying that one lately. As we near the edge of bookish podcasts, we also have The Incomparable, hosted by Jason Snell and a rotating cast of characters. Now, this is a podcast that will happily spend a full hour dissecting a 2-minute trailer for a show, like they did recently with Star Trek Discovery. But occasionally they talk about books, like they did with Neil Gaiman's American Gods and Nancy Boyce. And I love this sort of specific focus and deep dive into a book. The discussion is always insightful but fun. I know they'll go off and geek out about movies like Guardians of the Galaxy, TV shows like Legion, and go old school and talk about movies like E.T. and The Godfather. But I love this sort of geeky focus, and it's always irreverent and fun. All right, let's jump out of bookish podcast entirely and talk about Gastropod, co-hosted by Cynthia Graber and Nicola Twilley. It is basically exploring the intersection of food and science. A recent episode, they explored the mold koji, which is responsible for soy sauce, miso, and rice wine, and is basically the foundation of all Japanese food. It is so popular it has its own manga, and how US chefs are slowly experimenting with new uses for koji. Other episodes featured one on vitamins. Did you know that vitamin D comes from sheep's wool and that all the vitamins that we consume here in North America are in fact manufactured in China? So if you love food as much as I do, this is something worth geeking out about. Another round with Heaven and Tracy is a BuzzFeed podcast that I first discovered when they interviewed Hillary Clinton last year in the lead up to the election. Anyway, this is a podcast that never fails to make me laugh, and it's cultural criticism through a black lens. And while it may not seem obvious why I would listen to a podcast that talks about black hair microaggressions and fighting ashiness with shea butter and the reality of wigs, it's also about self-care and raising awareness, and they've featured some fantastic interviews with the likes of Lin-Manuel Miranda, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and trans activist Janet Mock. So it's well worth a listen. I could keep going, but I'll mention one more, and that is Nerdette, co-hosted by Trisha Bobita and Greta Johnson, and it basically features fantastic guests geeking out about something they love. A recent episode, they had asteroid hunter Dr. Carrie Nugent talking about dealing with a planetary defense officer, which is an actual title, a one-night stand asteroids, and the asteroid named Potato. Other episodes have featured Tom Hanks talking about his love for typewriters, and Guardians of the Galaxy and Gilmore Girl fame Sean Gunn geeking out basically about old school rap and cat rescue. So fantastic. Lots of podcasts to get you started if you're interested. I'll have a lot of your recommendations in the survey results next week, and I'm almost afraid to ask because I have too damn many in my queue already. But if you have a favorite podcast, why don't you list it in the comments below? So there you have it. I hope you all have a great week of reading, and we will talk to you soon.